So the recording just started, and welcome everybody to our second online seminar. Today, we're very happy to welcome Rob Shaw, who is a strength and conditioning coach. He's heading multiple, sorry, people are joining, it distracts me, it pops in my face right away. But he's heading a few high performance programs. Worked with, like I sent his bio in your email, just not to take too much time away from him, but basically he works and worked in the past with numerous high level athletes of many different sports: tennis, hockey, basketball, baseball, you guys name it. So he understands the specific needs for tennis, and he has background in nutrition. He's like, I personally know him, like we work together for quite some time, and I know he's constantly educating himself, learning different things, and like very passionate individual. So we're very lucky to have him, and I'm personally curious to hear what he's about to tell us. So Rob, on this note, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll be honest, I don't really like gassing myself up too much, but I will do so for the first couple of minutes, just so you guys have a good understanding of where I'm coming from all this, because I feel like it's pretty important to understand that not only is the stuff that I'm saying useful, but it has been useful for people that are either in similar situations or are heading down the direction that you want to go with your high performance kid, or even for just general wellness and performance for yourselves. It is what it is. Like all kind of falls in the same boat for me. So pretty much I started work off as a nurse. So I was working in ER, I was working in St. John's, I was working in Sunnybrook for a few different departments, whatever it is. Started getting training with athletes because in my past I played AAA hockey, AAA baseball. I played tennis, not at a high level, but a decent enough level that I can whack the ball around. Same thing with basketball, football, volleyball. We went for offices for volleyball, provincial stuff, and all that type of thing. So I have been down the circuit that a lot of these high performance kids have been down, and the rigors and the kind of the ups and downs that happens with it. I'm not going to say I'm familiar with all of it, but at least I have somewhat of an understanding on that point. In terms of people that I've worked with D1 players in tennis, D1 players in pretty much every sport. Just last year, I had 15 out of my 17 hockey guys got drafted to the OHL. So congrats to them. I'm not going to take credit for it, but it's just nice to put on a resume saying that I work with this person and now they're there, that type of thing. So that's pretty good for me. Same thing. I've actually had the chance to work with a couple different Olympians in different sports and that type of stuff. And I'm sure there's some other things that I'm missing, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's just nice for you guys to know that, yeah, I'm not just some guy with a snapback hat. I know I look kind of a little bit weird for this type of thing. So first off, I don't want to talk at the screen for a full hour, because I think that's extremely boring for everyone. So I really encourage you guys at any point, if I'm saying anything whatsoever, if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you have something like a little tangent or whatever, interrupt me. Turn on your mic, say, hey, I got some, and let me answer the question, because I find it's a lot better for everyone if I'm talking down the stream of path and you're like, oh, well, what about this scenario? And then there's 4 other people in the audience as well, too. That's like, oh, yeah, well, that relates to me as well, too. And we kind of build and we grow from there. So don't be shy. Please interrupt me. I'm being interrupted. That's okay. The general format that I want to go down first, we're going to start real simple for all the kids that are kind of haven't really been introduced to nutritional stuff. So we're going to talk about some macronutrients. We're going to go proteins, carbs, fats, quick reasons why those are good for you, kind of things that you can kind of put inside your diet right now, today, that will kind of benefit you going forward. And then I want to get a little bit more complicated with it towards the end. So I want to talk a little bit about your digestive system anatomy, how that kind of affects your performance as an athlete, and how to kind of fix certain issues and certain things that are more common for athletes, especially high performing ones. But before we get there, does anyone have any questions or anything that they want me to cover in the audience right now? Don't be shy. And we're all being shy. That's okay. So let's start.
Do you want us to use the chat for questions, or should we just interrupt?
No, just say it. Go ahead. Interrupt me. You're good. You're good.
Okay.
So we'll start off with the carbs, proteins, and fats then. So the 3 major macronutrients is just a word for the major 3 nutrients. Those of you that are familiar with them, this should be pretty easy. Those of you that don't know. So we're going to start with proteins. Proteins are pretty much meats anywhere across the board. Anything that comes from an animal. So we're thinking chicken, beef, lamb, If anyone else has anything others, duck, eggs, anything along those lines, pretty much anything that's moving that you kill and you eat from. Protein. That's our main sources of protein. You'll find that some foods, some stuff like nuts, some things like yogurts, dairies will have some amounts of protein in them, which is fine. I personally don't consider them a protein source because they're a little bit heavier on some of the other two macronutrients, which is carbohydrates and fats. So let's say, for example, and we'll get there in a minute, but for nuts, I would consider it mainly a fat source more than a protein source. So when we're making like a dinner plate, when I'm talking protein source, I want a meat on that plate, and ideally a meat that was naturally grown, that's organically grown, that's not one that's coming from a slaughterhouse. It's ideally, if you can afford it and you have the time, get it from a farm, support local farms, then also get good quality meats out of them as well too. You can taste the difference in that food when you put it inside your body, and for another reason that we'll talk about a little bit later, you get better benefits out of minerals and nutrients outside of that meat. Does that make sense to everyone? Please chime in if you don't. Lovely. Okay, good. We'll go on to the second one with in order of importance for me, which is fats. Now, if anyone can tell me what fats are, go for it. I'm used to like talking to a room, so usually people just chime in, but that's okay. So fats usually come with sources of proteins. So again, let's take that example of beef, because beef's it's a red meat. It's usually a fattier meat, that type of thing. You'll find a lot of people have a little bit of ifs, ands, and buts about saturated fats, unsaturated fats, that type of stuff. For me, I like a good mix of everything. So if you're getting saturated fats from your meats, which is like the fats that turn liquid when they get up to higher temperatures, but they're solid. So like butter, anything that's coming off a piece of animal, and I'm probably dairies and anything along those lines, all those saturated fats, I think are absolutely excellent for your system. So the main reason being that you need fats inside your body in order to digest fat soluble vitamins. So if anyone's heard about vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K2, and there's a few others as well too. All those things, you need good fats inside your body for those things to digest. If you don't have it inside your system, it doesn't digest. And then all of a sudden, all those vitamin D drops or supplements or whatever it is that we're putting in our kids' foods or whatever, it doesn't really do anything because there's nowhere for it to go. In other words, in other terms, fats just in general are good for your system because it's the prerequisite for cholesterols, and it's the prerequisite for pretty much any membrane that goes on with your cells. So we're talking about nutrition going straight into your cells, and we're talking about just the basics for all of your hormones. So for guys, testosterone is a major one, plus all your androgens, plus your cortisol, plus all your adrenaline, all that type of stuff, everything that you need as an athlete in order to perform, because your hormones are going to shoot up, they're going to come down, they're going to shoot up, come down. Same thing. If you don't have those fats in your diet, you're not going to have that kind of response from your body. Extremely important. Thirdly, carbohydrates. And this is probably the one that everyone's a little bit more familiar with. Carbohydrates are pretty much those side dishes, those fruits, those vegetables, everything else that's on your plate that's not meat, pretty much. So we're talking rice, we're talking pasta, we're talking mashed potatoes, every sort of vegetable, every sort of fruit. The reason why carbohydrates is so good for you, just good for you straight up, is they have the densest amount of minerals and nutrients in certain things. So for example, rice is pretty high in sodium, pretty high in some other vital nutrients that your body needs, and your body needs those nutrients in order to kind of work everything else across the body. So if you take, let's say, like a ketogenic diet, which is pretty much a little bit lower on the carbohydrate, a little bit higher on the proteins and fats, you might have a good response at first from being higher on the proteins and fats because now we're uplifting these two nutrients. But over time, especially as an athlete, if you don't have carbohydrates in your system, you won't be able to last. Your body fatigues, doesn't get enough of the right nutrition, and it becomes an issue going long term, not day of, but weeks and months and months and months and months. Yeah, is there a question?
Are you going to differentiate between sort of simple sugar carbohydrates and like the long branch, like slow?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Better more beneficial for athletes versus regular population.
Right. So simple carbs and long-term carbs. So let's take the rice example that we just did. Rice is more of a long-chain carb because if you look at it at a molecular level, it's a bunch of sugar molecules all attached to each other in a very long chain, which takes longer to break down within your system. So which means you get energy over a longer period of time, because as it breaks down, it gives you slow hits of energy, slow hit. So it's more like, oh, well, I'm going to burn up this energy over 3 to 5 hours rather than 1 to 2 hours, which is the exact opposite with simple carbohydrates. So the best example is just straight up table sugar. So we put in table sugar, which has like a molecule chain of this amount. So it digests really quickly, which gives you that sugar rush. And then we drop. And it gives you sugar rush. And then we drop. So like imagine the example I use with kids is if I give you a bag of Skittles and I tell you to go out and go play tennis for 30 minutes, what happens? Right away, you're like, okay, yeah, we're good. Okay, I'm going to hit this. I'm going to run here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then we get to like maybe the second set. And it's like, oh my God, I'm dying. I can't do it. I need another bag of Skittles. And you feed yourself with more Skittles, and it's the same thing. You get that rush, you go straight up, and then you come back down, which in an isolated vacuum is fine. But when we're talking about performance, you don't really want spikes and drops. You want a nice gradual coming up, nice gradual coming down. And that's not just that is nutrition just in a nutshell, but that's also performance in heavy aspect. You never really want to just go full out for a short period of time and then have that down period where you can't move. Does that kind of make sense? And does that answer your question as well too?
Rob, can I just quickly jump in? Just like in general, 100% agree. Just can you elaborate a little bit? Are there any extreme examples? Because I have some in my mind. Like I just want to hear it from your end, where a quick intake, like an intake of simple sugars, like you say, like a Snickers bar, would be okay.
Yeah,
I can
100%.
Yeah, right. Because I think it's important also to know that.
Right. And that's actually a good point for nutrition in general. There is no 100% rules on anything. Everything's always dependent on a little bit of everything else. But that specific example right there, I mean, all of you guys, if you watch tennis matches, you can see in between the points, in between games, in between sets, in between whatever, what does everyone kind of reach for as a snack? A banana. Usually some sort of fruit or some sort of quick sugar that's going to digest in your system right away, because maybe you need some sort of energy in your body right now. Absolutely. Especially if you're drained, especially if let's say you've gone through the entire day, you haven't had enough food. And then I ask you to do 200 push-ups because I'm a bit like that sometimes. Like, oh my God, Rob, I need some energy really quick. Okay. Take this simple sugar, which I prefer to be more fruits than anything else, but could be a Snickers bar, could be a Cliff bar, could be a juice box, could be whatever. But the main point there being that if you are going to take a simple sugar, make it as natural as possible, which in the natural occurring world is fruit. Fruit. That would be the best one because those sugars are going to digest a little bit better inside your system and not cause as much bloating, as much swelling up. It won't cause as much strain on your gut biome and on your enzymes inside your body compared to something like a Snickers bar, which will have sugars inside it, but also 3 or 4 other things that your body has to deal with and digest properly, which it isn't very good at digesting. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
And then did you have any other examples you want to bring in, Bogdan?
Well, like I was thinking, like in my mind, like for example, a player is in the third set, like they're super fatigued, like they're playing maybe in a hot climate, and because again, I did it. I'm gonna share it, and at the danger of everybody hearing it, and I just want to hear your perspective on this. So we were playing in Germany, right? And it was super hot, like July, as hot as it can get. 3 hours later, my player enters third set. So just 3 hours later. And he was about to pass out, like he was just like, So I gave him a Coca-Cola, just to like inject him with some sort of like quick sugar. That's the only thing that came to my mind. Like I had to react very quick. So I gave him a quick, sugar, like burst like this. I don't know, like what's your take on this?
Oh, I mean, if he's about to pass out, by all means, give it to him. 100%. Give him the sugar.
So I was thinking more like this, like that kind of example, like extreme, where it's like where it's okay to do those kind of things,
Absolutely, and it's a spectrum. Again, it's not like there isn't a hard rule saying you can never have sugar. I'd be a liar if I said I didn't enjoy an occasional pop or whatever it is. In those situations when you're mid-match, I think it's a good idea to bring something along those lines that has quick sugar inside it. So whether it be a couple bananas, whether it be a granola bar, like a Cliff bar that's pretty heavily laced with sugar. It could be a pop, although I'm not a huge fan of that, especially in hot weather. It just in general, it never really sits right with me. But for you, it's much better. Maybe for someone else that's listening, much better.
Because I saw it also on TV, like, you know, some
Yep.
players would have that. So maybe some kids saw, or maybe some parents saw. So I think it's important to clarify. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then
In
that
that
also,
situation, is it always not more advantageous to try to maintain a sort of a high level like of fruits and maybe bananas and things like that? But then what are your thoughts on, instead of a can of Coke, if there's a drop in blood sugar, you know, using those gel packs? Like there's all these aftermarket or off the shelf nutritional products that come to target directly those problems of dropping blood sugar. So you know, and then they combine it with other electrolytes and things like that, because dehydration becomes an issue and whatnot. So maybe you can comment
right,
on that if that's something
right.
worthwhile exploring.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. In terms of the products that are specifically designed for that, like I have a bunch of dextrose tablets that I keep with me when I'm working sideline for any of my sports, which for that exact reason, 100%. I would say if it's there for an emergency, great. If it's happening consistently, where your blood sugar is always dropping every match or every time you get to a certain point and you hit a wall, I think there's probably something bigger there that can be dealt with in terms of managing blood sugar across the board, whether that's, okay, we're low in this specific mineral like chromium or like whatever, that's not allowing that sugar to actually get inside the cell and it's causing issues. But if it's just that one thing, then yeah, it's whatever. You got to do what you got to do. If you need sugar, you need sugar. We're not going to take that away from you. It's not like we're going to say in the middle of a match, like, oh, well, you got to quit your match. You can't have a Coca-Cola. That's insane. Absolutely not. But then also you actually bring up another good point about the electrolytes, and that's kind of a key thing with carbohydrates, especially, which is why I kind of mentioned the ketogenic diet, because a lot of people, when they start thinking about food and performance and that type of thing, they think eliminating, which I'm not a huge fan of, just in general. Because when we start eliminating foods, we start eliminating the amount of actual nutrition that we're putting inside our body, the diversity of nutrition that we're putting inside of our body, and that type of thing. I always think a big spectrum of quality foods that you can put inside your body, the better, because it gives you those natural electrolytes, that sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, all of those, plus all the kind of things across the board in terms of that. Does that kind of answer both your questions, or did I just go off on another tangent again?
I have two questions coming to my mind. So first question is regarding the protein, right? You mentioned the meat.
Yep.
I heard the meat has two kind of meat. One is white meat, another is red meat.
Okay.
So my question is, from your professional viewpoint, is any difference between the red meat and the white meat, or there's no difference for the tennis player?
Yeah, so there is a difference, 100%. Usually white meat is quote unquote cleaner in terms of just straight up protein, in the same way that egg whites would be cleaner than a whole egg in straight up protein. Because if you take a look at the box, like, oh, well, I'm gonna have egg whites because it's just straight protein, it doesn't have anything else, so I'm just focusing on that. Where red meat will be a little bit heavier on the fatty side, which comes with its positives and benefits, again, depending on the person. Like for myself, I do way better on red meat than I do strictly on white meat, because it gives me all those extra fats, and it's a bit of a denser nutrition source for me. And I actually prefer that most of my athletes eat red meats more than white meats for that particular reason. Because for me, every time we have a chance to fuel up and every time we have a chance to eat is a chance to put as much minerals and nutrients into our body as possible. So for me, I always kind of go more towards the red meats than I do the white. But is there really that much of a difference that I would strictly say eat this, not that? Probably not, if that makes sense.
Yep, it makes sense. The second question is regarding the nutrition intake during the match. I saw some of the pro take some kind of food, right? Just you mentioned banana or these kind of things, probably take some nutrition during match.
Yep.
From my specific case, when I play some match, it's not as long as the pro plays, right? I mean, it's 2 hours, but normally after 1 hour or probably 8 games, I normally feel very tired. So this really affected my performance in the following match time. So I'm just wondering what kind of things maybe in your mind can quickly recovers my energy so I can perform a little bit better. So it's a lot that happens. After 8 games, I feel really exhausted. And after 8 games, so I just feel really tired. I cannot use my best performance
Right.
for the following games.
Right. And so that's an interesting point. Now, when you say 8 games, do you mean 8 matches or just 8 games?
So what we, for example, is 3 sets, right?
Yep.
So total 8 games. Just for example, I won 5 games, and the opponents gave 3 games. But
Gotcha.
after 8 games, I just frozen. I frozen for my 5 games. I cannot perform very well to win the following games. So it's a total 8 games. No matter opponent wins 4 games, I
Gotcha.
wins 4 games total after 8 games.
Gotcha. No,
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that because you're playing 8 matches in one day. That's pretty crazy. But so it kind of goes a little bit back to what we were just saying. So if it's within a match, we can't really put any sort of dense mineral or like dense energy supplement in there or any dense energy food, because anything that you put in needs to be digested. And if it needs a lot to be digested, so going back to that long chain versus short chain for the carbohydrates, which goes for the fats and the proteins as well too. Proteins and fats are generally a little bit longer, so it takes a little bit more to digest. So when you put that inside your system, like something heavy, like if you're going to have a steak in between your first set and your second set, you won't be able to play your second set because all that blood is just sitting right around your gut area, in your stomach, in your intestines. You won't be able to rotate. You won't be able to move. You might feel like falling asleep, just like after you have a big dinner or whatever it is. So it's always going to be a shorter chain version of that. So again, goes back to the fruit, goes back to some sort of juice, something with some quick sugars inside of it that's going to replenish your energy, and then electrolytes just in general. So I'm going to use the example of Gatorade, although I'm not a huge fan of Gatorade because of the high sugar content and the corn syrup and all that kind of stuff that they put inside there. But something along those lines that has sugar to replenish your cells' energy levels, plus the electrolytes, because the electrolytes are important for your brain to connect to pretty much anything inside your body. Without your electrolytes, you can't really control anything. So for your particular situation, I'm not quite sure because I don't know you very well, and I don't know kind of how your body functions. That's where I would start. I would start with taking like either a fruit or a fruit juice or something along those lines. Have that in between like your when you switch ends every 2 games or whatever it is, or at the end of the set. See how you feel. And if that still doesn't work, then that goes into something I want to touch on a little bit later in terms of, okay, if I'm putting in food and I'm not getting anything out of my food, then it's the digestive system that needs some correcting. So either we need some gut bacteria in there, we need some enzymes in there, we need some support for our liver, we need some support for our colon. So not just putting the food in, but how our body utilizes that food and what we can do to support that process. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense.
Perfect.
Can I jump in, Rob, and ask you a question about going back to what you said about protein?
Yep.
So our situation is a little bit complicated, maybe a little bit confusing, because we are not a meat-eating family and haven't been for generations as far back as probably recorded time.
Gotcha.
And so we do eat what I think is a fair bit of protein through lentils, the nuts, like all the other sources that you were mentioning, eggs certainly. And of course, we recognize that all of those protein sources do have the carbs or do have the fats, so they're not, sole protein sources. So we're aware of that and kind of cognizant and trying to do the best that we can.
Sure.
What I'm wondering is there kind of a magic number of grams of protein that we should be trying to hit for a growing athlete of some kind? And, Keshav does eat chicken, so we've kind of added that to his diet, but certain meats are kind of non-negotiables. Like we can't introduce beef into our diets. So
right.
Is there a number that we can kind of work towards and kind of go, okay, you've eaten a couple of eggs, you've eaten this, you've eaten that, you've kind of hit that protein gram requirement?
Yeah. I've heard a couple of numbers floating around, depending on who I talk to or whoever it is. And I know there's a couple of research studies, which I believe it's 2 times your weight in kilograms or similar to your weight in pounds. For how much to put in for an athlete that's trying to grow. I understand the situation where you can't have where it's just not in the question, which makes it difficult, especially for an athlete.
We're constantly all of our meals. I mean, I think that we're making sure that we hit all of those macronutrients in a big way. Sure. But of course, like when we eat a cup of lentils, we've got protein, but we've also got the carb in there as well. So, I'm trying to educate myself as well. And
sure.
Again, it's very foreign to me in terms of how we grew up. But like that kind of number, if like you're saying, equivalent to the pounds? Is that what?
Yeah, I go equivalent to the pounds because it's just
Equivalent to
easier for me. I don't
pounds.
use
Yeah.
kilograms, but yeah,
Okay,
either
okay.
twice the
That's
kilograms or
helpful.
equal to pounds.
I think
Okay,
it's
thanks, Rob.
1
That's
gram
helpful.
per kilogram of body weight. Isn't that the standard?
Something
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, but
Okay.
in terms of a
And then
performance athlete, sorry, go
it
on.
might be more, 1.5. I think it's what. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
I
Okay,
got a
thank
quick
you.
question. Just to add to her point, she brought up a really good point on the macronutrient protein. Maybe you can discuss if fish is something that is also that can be introduced, and then I'll mute myself.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, fish is a meat, number one. So it is an animal. So if you can eat it, then go ahead and put it in your system. Fish is also pretty good in omegas. You hear a bunch about omega-3s and all that type of stuff, which is anti-inflammatory in nature, good for you, all that kind of thing. One thing that I do have a qualm for with fish is, again, kind of where the fish comes from. And it's the same problem that I have with like cows and pigs and all that type of stuff, because there are fish farms and people have to make a living selling the fish to the grocery stores and all the supply chain and that type of thing. So it kind of muddies up the process in terms of what we're getting out of that fish, how the fish is grown, how the fish is raised, what they're putting into it, the levels, the amount of minerals and toxins that are inside the water that the fish will breathe and drink out of and that type of thing, because that goes right into the meat of any animal that we're dealing with and that type of thing. But fish the concept of fish is great. I love fish. I absolutely love fish, but just make sure that you're getting it again from a good source, hopefully something a little bit local rather than from the supermarket store, because you don't really know where that stuff's come from. And as a guy that worked in restaurants before and has dealt with supply chain and has worked in grocery stores and dealt with that supply chain as well too, you'd be really surprised how long these pieces of meat are sitting somewhere, either on a factory or in a truck or in the back of the fridge at the grocery store, or even on the grocery store shelf. And again, touching on it right after this point as well too, your food needs to be able to digest and break down by itself. And actually, we might as well just lead right into this. So a good point. Has anyone here ever seen the documentary Super Size Me? Yeah. So I think some of the parents will have seen it, maybe the kids not so much. One point that I like to bring out with the Super Size Me documentary, although there's a bunch of points in there that we could talk about, is there's pretty much a guy who ate McDonald's for an entire month, if I remember the documentary correctly. And they took health markers before and after. Obviously, after the month, the health markers weren't great. That's kind of to be expected. It's McDonald's. It's not great food. But the main point that I took from that documentary is they took a thing of fries. I forget how big it was. I think it was like a medium or a large. And the guy left the fries out on a counter for a year. And normally when you leave food out on a counter for a year, it goes moldy and it disintegrates and degenerates. And like if you put a banana on your counter within a week, it looks disgusting. You don't want to touch it. These fries look completely fine. They looked almost fresh straight out of the oven. So I was like, oh my God, what are they putting into these fries? And that's half the equation. They do put stuff into the foods that you have at fast food restaurants, on your supply chain, in your grocery store, anything on a pantry, so it can last long enough. Otherwise, every piece of food would go rotten and no one would be able to buy anything. But that comes with a bit of an issue, because now the things that they're adding to the food and even the enzymes and the stuff they're taking out of the food to stop it from breaking down, that makes it harder on your own system, because your system relies on those enzymes as well to help break down that food. Your system relies on your gut bacteria, your stomach acid, and all that to break down that food inside your body. And when we're talking about athletes who we tell eat as much food as possible, just shove it in because you need the energy, which is absolutely correct. They do need the energy. But if we're putting in a bunch of food that cannot digest very well inside of our system, everything kind of gets packed up. So our stomach acid starts getting less because we don't have enough of it. Our enzymes start breaking down because we're asking you to do too much too soon, and then we have a drop. But during this drop, we're putting in more food. So it's a lactose allergy is actually a really good example. So people that are allergic to like milk, dairy, anything along those lines, you need a lactase enzyme to help break that down. And generally, lactose or anything dairy related is a little bit tougher to break down just in general because of how a cow is built and what cows eat and all that type of stuff. I believe cows have 4 stomachs, if I'm correct in remembering that. Which is, again, comparing that to a human stomach doesn't even compare, whatever it is. But when you get someone with an allergy like that, and then you put that food inside your system, it's not necessarily that, oh my God, you just put milk in me and I can't digest it. It's usually, well, I don't have a background of making enough of that enzyme in the first place. I also don't have the right bacterial strain inside my body that's been fed long enough to grow to the point that can actually be useful in breaking down this food. And that's where we get into those allergy issues with nuts, with milk, with whatever else, grass, pollen. Like that stuff doesn't usually happen. It's happened over the last 50 years, which goes in line with the supply chain and kind of what we've been putting into foods, what we've been taking out of foods and all that kind of stuff, and how our body reacts to it, because our whole body is an ecosystem. If you're going to treat your ecosystem like trash, you're going to get trash out of it in return. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? Have I lost anyone here? I think we're good. Any questions so far? Nope. Lovely. So if that's okay, let me just do a quick demonstration on what I would have in a dinner plate. So actually, I'll talk about my dinner that I'm going to have tonight. So for my dinner plate, I'm going to have some sort of a carb, some sort of a protein, and some sort of a fat. And that's all I'm looking for. I don't really care. Like vegetables are important, but for the reasons I'll mention in a sec, sometimes they aren't necessarily, as long as we're getting the right minerals and nutrients in. Although that's a horrible message to send to all the little kids out there: eat your vegetables, because they are dense in minerals and nutrients. Sorry, sorry, my bad. But for me tonight, I have pasta, which is stuffed, I believe, with sausage and spinach. It isn't homemade. I apologize about that, but it's the closest thing that I can find. It's from Longo's. They make it in-house, which is nice. I also have meat sauce. So it's ground beef with tomato on top, which is what I'm looking for out of my meal, because the ground beef itself, it's good quality beef. I got it straight from a farm. And then the tomato sauce itself, although it's from a can, it's from a jar. The jar itself is glass, which I'll talk about in a sec. And the tomatoes itself, I mean, you can just taste the difference. It's not that canned stuff, that the like the sealed canned stuff. It's from the jar. You can tell it was made somewhere recently, which is, I mean, it's important to me. It's important to me. So for me, there's my protein, because I have my meat in there. I also have a little bit of fats because of that red meat that we talked about earlier, which is a little bit denser in fats as well too. So I can kind of just combine the two, and it works like that. And my carbohydrates come from the pasta and the stuff that's stuffed inside the pasta. And that takes care of my dinner. And that's simple enough that I don't really have to think about it, which is also key for you guys at home, parents. When you're making food, you're like, oh my God, we need 30 grams of this and 20 grams of this and maybe a little bit of this, and we stir it up and then we put it on the plate. No, it's pretty simple. It's kind of what you guys have been having for dinner for your entire life. It's just making sure that we get that balance through all of our meals throughout the day. Does that make sense to everyone? The silence is really weird. Thank you. Thank you, whoever said, yeah, I appreciate it.
I don't, if you don't mind, I'd like to comment on that. Like, I understand what you're trying to achieve there. Just to supplement, you know, something like that, I'm always constantly preaching, my wife and I, to the children about the importance of having sort of some set type of vegetables, greens, whatever, carrots, tomatoes, and also making sure, you know, I agree with your initial point about the fats, because we're trying to look at when you're doing this much sort of activity on a daily basis, you're creating inflammation in the body. So we want to try to introduce anti-inflammatory, natural types of remedies, and that comes in the way of, you know, like fatty fishes, certain fruits and vegetables as well. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, maybe that, and we try to preach that to the kids. So.
Yeah, 100%. And I probably shouldn't have said that thing about the vegetables, because now that's what everyone's going to take away from this whole presentation. It's like, oh, well, Rob said vegetables are bad for you, so we're not going to take it. That's not true. That's not true at all. Vegetables, just in general, for every color. So green, orange, yellow, red, blue, purple, everything. All of them have a different diversity of minerals and things inside of them that are good for your body. So even if we just say eat your greens, it's not just about the greens, although greens are a great source of minerals in general. We need our red foods because it has certain things inside of there that help out your heart. We need our orange and yellow foods because it has certain vitamins and nutrients inside there that can help out different processes in our body, everything. And I don't know if anyone's in here, maybe Kashav, because I think he's the only one in here that was with us in summer, Bogdan.
Correct. Sasha should be here. I saw him logging in.
I was here.
Gotcha. Sorry, I can't see who's in the room. That's my bad, guys. But I don't know if you guys remember, but we did, I think, a full day on different colored fruits and vegetables and the different benefits of each. And I'm not going to ask you guys to memorize that from there, because I know there was a bit of issue with memorization at that point. But it's just the kind of point to make is we need everything. everything. We don't want to restrict foods. We don't want to just stick with one. Oh, well, these foods work with me, I'm going to stay here. Diversify everything. Try some new things. Try out new grocery stores. I live in Markham. I go to TNT grocery store all the time, and I see stuff that I've never seen before. Like, it's crazy. I've seen fruits and vegetables that I haven't even seen, and you go try those out, and they either taste good or they don't. But at least you tried it, and you've given your body a new stimulus to try and produce a new bacterial strain, a new enzyme, give your digestive system a bit of a challenge to try and adapt and overcome. And that's important for pretty much anything in terms of high performance. Does that kind of make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. So if anyone has any questions about that stuff, please let me know now, or anything you want me to expand on before I move on to the anatomy of stuff, because now it gets a little bit trickier.
Rob, I have a question.
Yep.
So, yeah, hi. It's easy at home to making food, but how about on the run? Like, do you have any suggestions to what we bring when the kids are on the go? Like
Yes.
Ari has a cross country competition tomorrow, and really struggle because we need to be there 9:30 to 3. I don't know what to bring for lunch. I don't want to do fast food, but any suggestions?
Yeah. And that part.
Like pasta.
Yeah. And that part gets a little tricky because it's very individual. It's like, so for your case right there, it could be just as simple as, okay, we're going to make your lunch today. We're going to do it right now tonight. We're going to put it in the fridge, so you can just pack it up and go. And so you have homemade food and that type of thing. Now, I do understand that everyone's schedule is completely busy. That isn't really something that everyone can do. So for me, when I'm out at, let's say, a hockey tournament, or I'm out of country, or I'm out of town, or whatever it is, the first place I go to for food is a grocery store. Not for ingredients, but usually at most grocery stores, at least in North America for right now, will have some sort of a hot bar or ready-made meals or whatever. So it's food that they made in-house, but they just package it and they put it on the shelf every 2 or 3 days, which again isn't perfect, but it's good enough for me to the point that, okay, I'm having real food that's been cooked by someone over here. It probably isn't the best quality food for all of the reasons that we said before, but it's doable for right now. And that's why I want it's almost like a different tier. So if we're talking about the top tier, is homemade food, locally sourced. I know where everything was grown. I know how everything's cooked. That's fantastic. Can't always be there. That's fine. The next best thing is, okay, I'm going to get fresh fruit from the grocery store. Maybe someone else made it, maybe not. Or maybe I take those ingredients and make it at home. And then I still kind of have a good concept, and I'm still getting good quality food, even though it's not this quality. And then the last tier is, okay, well, I'm out. I'm going to grab Tim Hortons. I'm going to grab something quick just to put something in my system. I'm going to grab McDonald's. I'm going to grab Harvey's. I'm going to go to a restaurant and grab something that we made there, whatever it is, where we have no idea what the food is. It's never been cooked. It might have been pre-cooked when it came in. It might have been sitting on a shelf. You don't know. We don't know. So in those terms of tiers, I'd rather stay up here as much as I possible. Even if we slip occasionally down to here every now and then, it's not the end of the world. It's not like you're, oh, well, we screwed up months of work. Oh my God. It's just, oh, well, today we went down here for a sec. Let's make sure that we stay up at these tiers up top through here. Does that kind of make sense?
Right. My question is, rather than what you bring usually when you are on the go, like,
oh, like the actual food itself.
Yeah. Like,
oh, gotcha.
Do you have specific things you bring? I see banana all the way, right? But other than banana, do you bring something with you, like a fresh food? And usually. Gotcha. Sorry, I completely went off in a different direction. Oh, my bad. My actual answer is no. I don't have specific foods that I bring. Just because, like, throughout the year, I'll just have different. I want different things. You know what I mean? So, like, in summer, I'd probably lean more towards a salad because it's a little bit lighter, because it's a little bit hotter out. I have some sort of protein on top, maybe get a little bit of dressing over there, and then maybe a side of fruits. I'm still getting my carbs, I'm still getting my proteins and all that type of thing, but I'm not swollen up to the point where I'm outside in the heat and I feel like I want to die, because I think everyone's kind of been there at that point where it's really hot out and you're digesting food at the same time, and it just makes you feel like you don't want to do anything. Where more so in winter, I would have like a chili or something like that. So something that's a little bit heavier, something maybe a little bit hotter, something to help. It's not that it warms me up, but it makes me feel a bit warmer. which kind of goes down the digestive system a little bit better. It keeps my morale up and that type of thing. But again, just coming back down to the same thing that we talked about in the front: protein, carb, fat. You can't go wrong if you have a little bit of those on everything. In terms of cross country for tomorrow, so to specifically answer your question on that one, I would bring some sort of a sandwich. Honestly, like something that has, I prefer like a sourdough bread, something that's kind of like made in a bakery rather than the bread that you just buy off the shelf, because it digests a little bit better, a little bit easier. Mayo, cheese, all locally sourced, all made organically, that type of thing. Throw some meat inside there, and then maybe a fruit and something a little bit heavier drink wise. So if you can make a smoothie, great. If it's just a bunch of assortment of fruits or whatever, even better. Maybe it's a trail mix type of thing, which is pretty good for cross country, because you have trail mix, which is just nuts and raisins and all that type of stuff. So it gives you some short-term energy and a little bit of a long-term energy, that type of thing that'll allow her to kind of him.
Yeah.
Daughter or son. Either way, but it gives you a little bit of energy on both ends to allow her to kind of go all the way through that race and not fatigue out in between. And then the final touch would also be having some sort of an electrolyte drink. So if you don't have any electrolyte drinks at home, completely fine. I would just put water, salt, and honey. I think Bogdan actually made a post about this a couple months back on his Instagram with a recipe. So go check out his Instagram for that recipe. And I think I commented on there as well too.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Does that answer your question better? Sorry about the first one.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for giving me some ideas.
Perfect. Lovely. Anything else before we move on?
I have a question for you to follow up on what Dr. Fayez was saying about anti-inflammatories.
Sure.
Aside from things like turmeric or cinnamon or cherry juice, are there some foods that you can recommend that would allow our children to get the benefits of the anti-inflammatories within those foods that would allow them to succeed, especially as they're moving further and further into the tournaments?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is a bit more complicated, because I feel like if inflammation is an issue consistently, then there's something in terms of our digestion that needs to kind of be fixed over the long term. Because if we're constantly inflamed, even if we're going through the rigors of the sport or whatever it is, it should be manageable within that match setting within a tournament over the 3-4 days. If it's every week and every month where like, oh, well, we're constantly inflamed, these knees are lighting up, the elbows lighting up, the shoulders lighting up, or just everything's just kind of feeling like garbage as we're going through, I think there's a bunch of things in the background that could probably be dealt with, whether that goes into digestive health that we're going to talk about in a sec, whether it goes into how we use our fascia, how we use our levers, and how we use our connective tissues more so than muscle tissues or whatever it is. And there's probably some neurological things that are going on there. But in terms of just foods to kind of to aid with that process, vegetables, 100%. 100%. In fact, white vegetables in general. So stuff like onions, garlics, I'm probably forgetting a few of them, but like even like white grapes or whatever it is. I forget exactly what it is. And Dr. Fayez, if you know, maybe you can chime in on this a little bit more. There's specific carotids, some C word, whatever it is, that have that give specific food specific colors. And those specific
the carotenoids and the high polyphenol foods, like the darker ones, like the darker root vegetables, like the family from the turnips, beets, carrots, all that kind of stuff. Things like even high polyphenols from tomatoes, like lycopene. Turmeric he mentioned is a great idea as far as anti-inflammatory. But you brought up a good point. If there's repeated inflammation going on, that is correct. There's probably an issue with the digestion and an issue with absorbing the amount of nutrients you should be with just your regular diet and intake. So that's probably a more systematic issue, which you have to explore, that exists maybe in the gut biome or the probiotic type of makeup that you have with your digestion. So, but I think you can get a lot of anti-inflammatories from the vegetables. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Lovely to have a doctor on standby. Appreciate it, Pius.
No. I mean, I'm a chiropractor, but anyways, we've done a lot of nutritional training, so and this is kind of what we've seen. But
right.
Yeah, I appreciate
it.
100%.
100% agree with all of that. And then another big one that I've noticed with kids recently is water intake, just in general. Not necessarily that they're not having enough water, but the water that they're having isn't being absorbed into their system very well. And for me, that comes back down to, okay, what kind of water are they having? Is it the stuff that's coming straight out of the tap, which I'll get into in a sec? Is it filtered water? Is it mineralized water? Is it natural well water? What is it? And for most people, it's tap water or filtered water, which by itself, not really a concern. The process that I'm familiar with most city water is that it's cleaned with chlorine. Then it goes through metal pipes, usually either copper or iron or a mixture of the two, and then it comes to your sink, which usually means that metals are leaching into the water. Just my understanding of it. I'm not, this isn't 100% thing. This is just how I kind of view it. And when we get those kind of things leaching into our water, it messes up the electrolyte profile that's supposed to happen in natural water. So it doesn't interact with the cells very well. So when I look at putting electrolytes in water, it's not so much the electrolytes itself. It's, okay, we're putting an electrical charge on our water so that water can actually interact with the cells a lot better and rehydrate the system a little bit more. At least that's how it's understood to me. Dr. Pies, do you have anything you want to add on to that?
No, that's a good point. There's still a lot of, research coming out. Just hydration is always an issue, I think, with kids. They don't remember to drink enough, and they don't drink enough, and their thirst centers don't go off as often as they should. There's a lot of stuff on pre-hydrating before the event as well, on a slower level, over a long period of time. And then making sure you have hydration ready at the event, and then post event. But yeah, as far as like city water stuff, like I don't have a lot of data on that. I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Fair enough. But that's my main ones that I normally say. So if it's not necessarily like, okay, we're gonna load up on foods to stop inflammation. Certain foods absolutely help inflammation, but it's more so just having a background of those foods always on our plate at all points of time. So it's always just there in the background rather than saying, oh, well, we have this specific inflammatory issue. Let's shove as much anti-inflammatory food in there and see what happens. Because like I think both of us have been trying to kind of come across is it's usually, if there's always a problem that's long-term, it's usually a systemic problem. And then we kind of have to address that as we're going forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Well, I mean, from my perspective, that's what I've observed. But yeah, this gentleman was asking that question. So
cool.
The inflammation issue, I mean, that's as much for me as it is for my son.
Gotcha.
Yeah. As we age, it becomes a lot different, right? Our body assimilates nutrients very differently. So
there we go. Is there anything else that anyone has any questions on before we move on?
Yeah, Robert is way. I have quick question come to my mind. So, as you know, right, focus is so important during the tennis match, right? Sometimes the focus the match, but sometimes occasionally, just for my specific case, I believe we're probably similar to others. Sometimes my focus shifts away a little bit during the match, which really affects my performance. So I'm not sure it's a good question or not. It's not, but I would like to raise up. So any kind of foods maybe in your mind can help to keep the focus during the match.
Right. Yeah. So again, I don't like dissecting issues like this in terms of, okay, we're going to introduce this one food and it's going to solve all of our issues, because I don't think that's necessarily true. For me, focus in general, especially in kids these days, is a little bit tricky to come by. And I have my own reasoning behind that, which I don't think we'll have time to go into for today. But again, it usually comes back down to me in terms of how our whole body is functioning as a unit. So if you find that you're losing focus, your attention span just isn't there, you're not able to stay within that performance zone throughout the entire match or whatever it is, then most likely there's something going on inside your body that's not allowing you to do that. Whether that's strictly up in the brain, where it has to do with our chemicals like our dopamine or adrenaline or whatever. Maybe we're getting too much stimulus throughout the day and we've just run out of things to kind of produce when we're in that match. That could possibly be it. Could it possibly be that most of our serotonin receptors that sit inside of our gut, because it's the second brain of the body, isn't really allowing us to kind of produce the right chemicals and the right things that are going to allow us to get into that mood, allow us to get to that zone. Could be that, which comes back down to the digestive health. Another interesting point on that would actually be, again, the bacterial bacterial ecosystem inside your intestines and stomach as well too. And I believe there was a research study done within the last couple of years where they took a high performance athlete and they I forget how they did it, but they took like they found a way to get the gut biome inside the athlete and like be able to scan it and read it. And then they did the same with like an everyday person. And the different types of strains and bacteria strains inside the high performance athlete were not found in the person that wasn't a high performance athlete. And what we know about gut bacteria is that it's not just gut bacteria, it's bacteria throughout your entire body. So if we're going to feed a specific strain of gut bacteria that feeds off of, I don't know, a certain chemical inside fruits or a certain chemical inside of good proteins or whatever it is, and we allow that to proliferate and grow and expand in our body and feed that beneficial bacteria, usually good things happen. And then the same thing goes the other way. So if you have, let's say, a kid who's eating sugar 24/7 and then they have pop this and they go home and they go play video games and then they don't have enough water or have whatever, and we start feeding this bacterial strain that feeds on those specific things and isn't very beneficial to our body across the board, that becomes an issue where we start to lose focus, where we start to have bad attention span, where our eyes don't work as well, where our reaction times don't work as well, just because there's too much stuff going on inside the system. There's too much, whether it's inflammation or whether it's just straight up bacteria. Like I remember there was a thing where they took a biopsy of someone's knee and they found gut bacteria in there, which is, whoa, what is gut bacteria doing in my knee? That's crazy. How did it get there? And it's just, well, stuff is inflaming up, certain barriers to your stomach or your intestines are opening up, stuff's getting into the bloodstream, it's going across the body, and it's causing an immune response somewhere. Where whether we know where that is or whether we don't, it doesn't really matter. But it's the basics come down to, okay, we need good food, we need good sleep, we need good water, and we got to kind of control our environment and our day to day, making sure that we're not just pasted our eyes to a screen, making sure that we're not not to say that any one of our kids are gamblers, but that kind of idea of, I don't know if anyone's played Fortnite or whatever it is, but like, oh, that loot box system, we're like, oh my God, I'm going to get a new skin or I'm going to get a new thing. And then it just kind of drags you in and keeps going. And it wears down those pathways that we need if we want to be a high performance athlete, because we need all that for that 2 or 3 hour window that we're playing in a match. And if we're already fatigued by the time we get there, you're screwed. Does that make sense, Wei?
Yeah. It's another thing just come to mind. So do you think the chocolate is good to take during match, or it doesn't matter, or just based on every individual's specific conditions? Chocolate is good to take during match, or just it doesn't matter?
Right. And this is kind of giving me my answer for anything in terms of food. It depends on how it's made. If you get like maybe like a Hershey's bar, or like a Mars bar, an Aero bar, which is kind of made of just oils and high fructose corn syrups and that type of stuff, then no, probably not, because that's not going to digest very well in your system. And it's probably going to cause more damage than help you out. Even other than that specific scenario that Bogdan was talking about earlier on in this conversation, where it's like, okay, that's the only thing we have and we're dying and we need something. So yeah, have it. That's completely fine. But if it's an every match thing where, oh, I need this piece of chocolate, I would try and get it as close to like 100% cocoa as you can. So more dark chocolate than anything else, not milk, not white, not all the sugar laced ones, as whole and as natural as you can. And there are benefits from the chocolate itself. I know chocolates are a little bit higher in magnesium, and I'm sure there's some other things that I'm forgetting that are good for you. And they have some natural sugars and that type of thing. So I wouldn't say it's bad. It probably wouldn't be my go-to choice, to be honest, just because I haven't thought of it before. But if it works for you and if it's as natural as possible, then yeah, by all means, go for it.
Okay, doctor, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we're running close to 8:30. Bogdan, how are we doing for time?
Is there, like, you wanted to cover one more thing?
I could do it pretty quick though. I don't have to go through everything.
It's up to you, Rob. Like, we can maybe, if anybody has more questions, maybe we can dive into like Q&A based on, like things that parents want to ask.
Yeah,
maybe
for sure.
We'll leave that part for later, just to respect everyone's time.
I don't want to
or
keep you guys on this all night. I'll leave my contact information and all that kind of stuff if you guys have individual questions or anything. But yeah, let's do a Q&A right now, and then maybe I can send out a couple pieces of information over the next couple of days that will help feed some more information if that's okay.
Sure.
So does anyone have any questions that I haven't already answered?
No, I don't.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks, Sasha.
Appreciate it. Okay, so let me go through this really quick, and then we'll get you guys out of here, and I'll leave all my contact information and everything. So a couple specific situations that I've dealt with in terms of high performance athletes, people that don't move very fast, people that don't move very well. So when we're talking about tennis, it's usually getting out of the corner, coming back, getting out of the corner, coming back, using the edges of your feet to kind of explode into your backhand. Same thing on the forehand side, whether that's hand-eye or just, well, my strokes aren't very fluid, and you're always trying to focus on something on your technique where something's always off, or your arm's in a little bit tight, or whatever it is. Maybe it's my shoulder hurts, my elbow hurts, my wrist hurts, my knee hurts, my ankle hurts, or whatever. Common things for tennis for all that kind of stuff, and just kind of how I would approach that situation really quick. And if you guys have specific examples you want me to address, feel free to let me know, and we'll go from there. So the main thing for me, so when we're talking about any sort of athletic, oh, well, we've been working on this for so long and we're not getting faster, we're not getting stronger, hasn't really changed, although there's some small improvements or whatever it is. It's usually 100% a digestive system issue, 100%. And the reason why for me is your major organs. I'll stand up here for a sec. So from like here to here sits pretty much all of our major digestive organs. We got our stomach and pancreas right here. We have our liver on the right side here. We have a spleen on the left side here. We have our intestines that sit all the way in the middle here. And there's a couple others which we don't have to worry about for right now. But all that kind of stuff matters. So if, again, going back to what we were talking about before, if we're not putting in good quality foods, your performance will suffer. Because number one, your liver's job is to filter out all those foods that you put in. Your stomach has to break all them down. Your intestines have to try as hard as they can to pull as many nutrients or water from the foods that you're putting in. And if these get gummed up or stopped or broken down or whatever, your ability to rotate onto that forehand side where this liver's sitting right here, if this swells up even by a little bit, it's going to stop you from getting across here with that rib cage. Same thing on the spleen over here if we're having a response to whatever food that you're putting in. So if you're lactose intolerant and you're putting in lactose because you're not making that enzyme or whatever it is, this is going to swell up. And then all of a sudden we can't rotate here. We can't finish there. And that becomes an issue. And when we can't rotate through the rib cage and the torso or the core, whatever you want to call it, that's when different parts of our body starts getting inflamed and sore because we start overusing these things. So those of you that kind of have their arm inside here and is trying to like rotate through this motion or just rotate from the forearm like that as we're going through a stroke, it's usually because that shoulder doesn't feel very free to move and rotate, which usually means the ribs aren't feeling very free to rotate and the hips aren't feeling very free to rotate. And that comes back down into all this stuff in the middle here. So if that is you or that is someone that you know, fix your digestion. Now, how do we do that? First thing we look at, gut bacteria. What can we do to fix our gut bacteria in the short term as a probiotic? You get a good one, you put that into your ecosystem. Ideally, it gives you new bacterial strains or beneficial bacterial strains that you can feed, but that only works if you're also eliminating foods that are going to cause backed up issues. If you're getting rid of those sugars, if you're putting in the natural foods, if you're doing all the right things on the intake side. If you're not putting in good foods and you try using a probiotic, it's not going to work. And at worst case, it might actually make it worse. So that's important to understand. You can't just do one without the other. You need to put in good foods and you need to have a good biodiversity inside your gut bacteria here. So probiotic is good if you do the other stuff. Second, enzymes, full spectrum enzymes. So again, same thing. Enzymes are there to help break down foods even faster or to help that process of speeding up those foods. So if you find that you're just kind of stuck, you're putting in so much food that, oh, well, it's just not digesting, add some enzymes in, see how it feels. You might find that your digestion goes through even faster. This stuff starts kind of slimming down a little bit on you. So those of you that are looking for weight loss or anti-inflammation or whatever it is, also a great thing to help out. Once this stuff goes down, if you start to feel better, congratulations, you've solved that problem for now. And I'll come back to that in a sec. Third, and this might be a little controversial, so I apologize, but this is just my personal feelings on it. I feel like cleansing out your liver with using herbal whatever, or cleansing out your intestines using herbal whatever is a great idea to do at least once or twice a year. And the reason why I say that isn't because that your body isn't able to do it by itself. It's just because so much of our environment these days has so much of an effect on what we put into our system and how it reacts. Your skin interacts with everything. Every time you breathe in, you're breathing in some sort of pollutant or chemical or whatever it is. And it increases the burden of how much our body has to deal with. And I feel if you can use a herbal remedy to kind of speed up that process or aid it every now and then, it's a good idea. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? No complaints, nothing being thrown at me. Good, lovely. Going back for a second to that gut bacteria and the enzymes. So if you find that you're taking probiotics and you're taking enzymes and you've done your liver cleanse and you've done your colon cleanse and everything's kind of flushed out, I feel great, but then it keeps returning. Most likely the last thing there is your stress. And I don't necessarily mean just your mental stress. I also mean physical stress. I also mean emotional stress. I also mean just the stressors of doing your day-to-day grind of your high performance stuff. Oh, I have 3-hour practice here, then I have a private here, and then I have a tournament on this tier over here, but I've got soccer at school, plus I've got to maintain all my friendships at school, plus I've got work for you older guys, all that type of thing. Everything adds up. And for some of you may have heard this analogy, but consider it a cup. Every little thing that you do throughout the day, no matter how big and how small it is, fills up that cup. And you only have a certain limit of what you can put in day to day. Once you go over top that limit, now we're burning our body's resources, the stuff that we're putting in. And if you go way over the limit and we burnt all of our body's resources, now we start breaking down. And that's where we get into issues. So again, finding ways to manage schedules, finding ways to manage stress. And this is actually something that I've really appreciated about Bogdan. He understands this. So congratulations to all you guys in the academy. I think you're in good hands. Yeah, there's always a conversation of, okay, when do we push? When do we not push? Can we do this at this time? Can we do this at this time? Are we giving enough stimulus? Are we giving too much stimulus? There was times this summer where I walked into our summer camp and Bogdan told me, I was like, hey, listen, it's like 35 degrees out. It's probably a bad idea. It's like, yeah, no, it's 35 degrees out plus humidity. It's always like 42 and everyone's dying. I don't know, Cash and Sasha, you guys probably remember some of those days. But it's extremely important to take in all these factors. We aren't machines. You're an animal at the end of the day. There's going to be highs and lows. It's important to manage it as you go. That also goes with water. That also goes with sleep. Make sure you have enough water. You're 70 to 80% water, depending on who you ask, but it's extraordinarily important. If you're sweating all the time, you need water. If you are not sweating, you probably need more water. It just goes both ways. You cannot sweat if you don't have any water in your system. If you cannot sweat, your body will not perform because it will not let you get to the place where you're actually exerting yourself to the point that you can sweat. So just things to think about. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? The silence is killing me. It is what it is. But that's pretty much all I've got for you guys today. I don't want to take another hour away from you trying to explain all this kind of stuff. If you guys are interested and you have questions for me, I'll give my email and my phone number to Bogdan, and you guys can reach out to me personally or whatever it is. If you have any questions right now, please feel free. Just jump in, chime in, send something in the chat, whatever it is. But other than that, I think we're done for today.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Rob, thank you so much. To all the parents, I will send an email tomorrow morning with Rob's contact information and this presentation in video. Yeah, so you can recap or share it with somebody who might benefit from it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Have a good one, guys. Have a good season.
Thank you.
Cheers.